Hi everybody and welcome to That's Football. I'm Mark Goldbridge with your latest football news, and I tell you what, it's absolutely incredible. Absolutely not fantastic. Newcastle might have to sell to buy as they face a financial crisis. I want to get your comments on this because is this good for football or is it actually bad? Have we created a scenario where one football club will dominate this league whilst everybody else complies with the rules? Is the Premier League in a situation where it's contradicting its own rules in a sense? And I'm talking Man City and I'm talking Newcastle. So let's get into it, and I'll be very interested to get your comments on this because I don't profess to know everything about the financials of Newcastle or the financial fair play rules. But what it appears to me to be the situation is, listening to Newcastle, the manager, over the last 24 hours, is that Newcastle are in a situation where because of losses, because of revenue, even though they're the richest club in the world, propped up by Saudi Arabia, they can't spend that money because they are aware of the rules and complying with the rules that revenue, transfer spend is the gap that you can spend. And it doesn't matter how much money you've got in your bank, you've got to comply with those revenue rules. And Newcastle obviously are in the Champions League, out the Champions League, might not be in it next season. How do they boost those revenues that allows them to then spend the wealth that they've got from their owners? It's really, really interesting. Oh, just before I start as well, or continue, don't forget Goldbridge Saves Football is out today. We're talking about who is the better manager, Ten Hag or Poch, plus previewing the Premier League weekend. Goldbridge Saves Football podcast out now, Spotify and iTunes. Links in the description. It's a cracker this week. But back to what I was talking about there. My big issue is that, and you can have two opinions on this. As a Manchester United fan, I expected Newcastle to rocket to the top with the wealth that Man City had, you know, boosting them all the way there. And actually, listening to what Newcastle are saying, that's not what they want to do, and probably not what they, I think more importantly, it's what they can't do. A lot of people say, well, Newcastle are just doing it the right way. You've got to respect that. Well, they're being forced to do it the right way. I think if you said to Newcastle you can spend £500 million in the January transfer window and £1 billion in the summer, they'd do it if they wanted to do it. But they can't do that. They can't do that because they don't have the revenue to do that, and they're going to have to build that revenue up over a period of time. And we've seen Everton with a 10-point deduction, and we know that people are looking at that now. But does that not make a big, big difference when you've got Manchester City, who've had 10 years of doing what they've been doing, and let's just say it's going to go to court, 115 charges, but they've done it all. So you've basically got a Premier League now where everybody is complying with the rules, but you've got one team that allegedly hasn't complied with the rules for 15 years, but has benefited from the foundation of not benefiting for those rules. It's almost, in an analogy, the way it seems like to me is, there's a load of boats. If every Premier League club's a boat, and they're all racing, and Newcastle have got all this money they want to spend on their boat, but they can't do it because they've got to comply with the rules. And then there's Man City who've got everything on that boat. You know, they've got the power engine, they've got the best of the best, and they're being allowed to race. And I think that's the way I look at it. Unless someone's going to tell me any different, Manchester City may well have 115 charges, but when will they get into trouble for that, if they ever do? And what can't be disputed is, from all the evidential anecdotes out there, is that Manchester City didn't do what Newcastle are doing. They didn't go, our revenue isn't enough for us to do this. They found ways to boost that revenue through sponsorship deals that may or may not been linked to Abu Dhabi. So I think that what we have here is, in a footballing sense, we all expect Man City to go and win the league. But in a future sense, you've got a club in Newcastle, which I expected to very quickly fast-track itself up there with Man City because they can financially compete with it. And now we've got financial fair play that's got teeth that means they can't do it. And that's good for football. I mean, that is good for football, to have financial fair play and a level playing field, and you can't just get some rich person to buy your football club and chuck money in. You know, you've got to have the revenue to match that. And it could be massively beneficial for clubs like Liverpool and Manchester United and Arsenal and Chelsea, who've got traditional high revenues from early Premier League success. Whereas for someone like Newcastle, despite all the wealth they've got, they're going to have to generate revenue over a period of time by qualifying for the Champions League, by getting sponsorship deals in, etc. But they're going to have to do it under the scrutiny of the watchful regulators. And that probably is good for football. It probably is good if that's what you want. If they genuinely are going to have teeth, it will be good for football. But the problem is, there is a club out there that didn't have that watchful eye, with a financial fair play system that didn't have teeth. And for 15 years, they've just been, propping themselves up, going, and now they're a juggernaut. So I think what we need in football is what everybody wants, but you can't have because it's locked into the legal system, is we need clarity on these charges against Man City. We need to know what they've done, did they do it, and the punishment needs to be passed out that brings them back down to a level where everybody else is at the moment, because it's if not everybody's in the same boat, are they? That's what I'm trying to say. Not everybody's in the same boat. And look, in relation to Newcastle, I probably haven't done it justice, but what they're basically saying is that they have to comply, and they may have loads and loads of money from their owners, but Newcastle Football Club doesn't have that money. Newcastle Football Club is a project that they want to build out, and they've got to build those revenue streams, and they've got to get those sponsorship deals legitimately. And to do that means that they don't and cannot go and spend ridiculous money in the January transfer window. They're more positive about the summer. They're more positive about the future. But Newcastle will need to be qualifying for Europe for that. If they want to boost revenue, you've got to get yourself into Europe. And I was listening to the radio this morning, and they were saying that maybe Newcastle would need to sell a Bruno Guimaraes to, help them. And that would be a shame, because I think Bruno Guimaraes is a fantastic player. I'd take him at Manchester United in a heartbeat. But that sort of thing might help Newcastle. If you look at the way Chelsea and I hate to say it, Man City have operated, you sell a youth product for 40 million quid, that's pure profit on the balance books. And how many times have Man City done that recently? I mean, they've just done it with Cole Palmer. So Chelsea did it with Mason Mount. So sometimes you sell a good player, but the impact it has positively on your financials is amazing. So maybe that's what Newcastle will have to do. Maybe they'll have to let a Bruno Guimaraes go for 100 million to Real Madrid or somewhere like that, and then that will boost their finances by 100 to go again. And if you've got good recruitment, then it will work out fine. But I think the lesson from Newcastle is that they're just at the start of the journey, and I suppose it's a warning to any rich businessman that wants to buy a football club now, is that you can be the richest club in the world, and Newcastle are, but you can't just come in and dominate now like maybe Man City did for the first few years. You can't just get that money into the club easily. And I don't know the story of Man City, but a lot of people will say, well, they did it because financial fair play was weak, and they got all these sponsorship deals because they had companies that they could use for those sponsorship deals. You can't do that anymore. It will get heavily scrutinised. And the most important thing is, I believe Newcastle have done a deal with, was it Saudi Airlines or something like that? But the deal's been scrutinised as to it's not inflated. So, for example, you can't just get Saudi Airlines to go, there's £100 million a month for our sponsorship deal, because the regulators will go, that's completely and utterly disproportionate. You're basically laundering your money into the club on an inflated sponsorship deal that's not actually market value. So all those things are going to get looked at. But what are your thoughts on it? My thoughts are, this is good for football, because it means that, well, it means it's hard to, manipulate football with external wealth now. You've got to make it, you've got to make the books balance, you've got to do it legitimately. And I think that's really good. The problem is, there is one club, certainly in Man City, and maybe a couple of others, that are and have benefited massively over the last 10 years when that didn't happen, and that then gives them a huge head start when you do bring the rules in, which means that they obviously need to look at these charges and get it done quickly, which isn't going to happen. So that's a bit of an irritant, because it's not a level playing field, is it? It's meant to be a level playing field, but not everybody's playing that, because some people have been playing different rules for a few years now. Get your comments in. Smash a like on the video, and don't forget, this weekend, lots of watch-alongs. We've got Chelsea Fulham tomorrow and Newcastle Man City, funnily enough, tomorrow. Obviously, Spurs Man United on Saturday as well. And don't forget to check out the podcast, Goldbridge Saves Football. Links in the description. I'll speak to you on the next one.